Before power was measured in market share, it was measured in territory. Let's review the ultimate strategists. Standardized procedures enabled rapid gathering of troops and supplies, transforming bureaucracy into an offensive weapon. To understand this mechanism, we must view bureaucracy as institutional infrastructure rather than passive red tape. It minimizes transaction costs during sudden military mobilization crises in historical campaigns. Standardization is the core engine of administrative speed. When ledgers, measurements, and commands are uniform across the state, coordination costs drop significantly during critical campaigns in historical campaigns. Notice the distinction. We are not studying the bravery of individual warriors on the battlefield. We are examining the administrative systems that deliver those warriors to the front. When coordination costs are minimized, the sovereign can redirect resources faster than decentralized rivals. This administrative speed acts as a decisive force multiplier during conflicts in historical campaigns. Why did some ancient empires coordinate vast campaigns while others collapsed under logistical weight? The strategic answer lies in how they designed their standardized administrative procedures over time. The core problem is that pre-modern transport was physically limited by geography. Without fast communication, central commands relied on pre-arranged mobilization depots along major transit corridors over time. These depots functioned as logistic hubs, storing grain, fodder, and weapons. Their existence depended on standardized requisition procedures that local governors were required to execute immediately over time. Standardized procedures reduced the need for negotiations during crises. A governor did not argue over tax rates. They followed the established ledger formulas to deliver supplies over time. This speed of resource extraction is consistent with institutional economics. Minimized transaction costs allow the state to assemble larger forces than decentralized coalitions of regional leaders over time. The observable consequence is a rapid mobilization response. While decentralized adversaries are still debating their contributions, the centralized empire has already deployed its vanguard troops to the frontier. Look at this administrative loop. Standardized records enable precise resource assessment, which allows rapid planning, which translates into faster tactical deployment on the frontier regions in historical campaigns. Within this context, we must define mobilization throughput. It is the volume of troops and supplies that a command structure can assemble and transport within a specific time frame. Throughput was determined by the quality of administrative infrastructure, standardized roads, uniform currency, and centralized storehouses were the essential components of this mobilization weapon, always in historical campaigns. This physical infrastructure was consistent with strategic capacity. Rulers who invested in roads and grain depots could project power further than those who relied on feudal levies. Indeed, this administrative advantage was the true secret of imperial expansion. It was not superior weapons, but the capacity to sustain armies in the field for multiple seasons. Indeed, we must distinguish procedural speed from tactical flexibility. A bureaucracy is highly efficient at executing planned movements, but it struggles to adapt to unexpected operational disruptions over time. This distinction is crucial when analyzing imperial defeats. A system designed for massive logistics can be paralyzed if a single bridge or supply depot is destroyed over time. This vulnerability was the primary risk of centralized command. Rulers sacrificed local adaptability for global mobilization speed, leaving their forces exposed if the plan failed in historical campaigns. To mitigate this risk, some empires created regional supply hubs with local decision authority. However, this delegation reintroduced the principal agent problems we discussed previously in pre-modern campaigns always. This institutional dilemma shaped the boundaries of bureaucratic power. Rulers had to balance the efficiency of central control with the responsiveness of regional command centers in historical campaigns. The mechanism begins when central command issues a mobilization decree. This decree specifies the quantity of grain, soldiers, and draft animals required from each province in historical campaigns. As the decree travels, regional administrators consult their standardized land registers. They calculate the tax obligations of each district using uniform mathematical formulas immediately in pre-modern campaigns always. Local officers then gather the supplies at regional assembly points. Because procedures are standardized, Officers can verify quantity and quality without time-consuming disputes on site in historical campaigns. From the assembly points, the supplies are transported along Imperial roads using state-managed post systems. This transit is coordinated by central scribes monitoring the movement in historical campaigns. By the time the army arrives, the supplies are waiting at the frontier depot. The general can focus on the campaign without worrying about starvation in historical campaigns. This flow of resources shows that standardized bureaucracy coordinates power across distance. The state functions as a single machine, projecting force far beyond its capital in historical campaigns. At the same time, this machine requires constant fuel. The administrative staff must be paid, roads maintained, and records updated, representing a massive tax burden always over time. This tax burden is consistent with administrative maintenance costs. If the empire stops expanding, the cost of the bureaucracy can bankrupt the treasury of the state over time. To offset these maintenance costs, empires used standardized tribute systems. Conquered territories were integrated into the administrative network, providing resources for future mobilization campaigns in pre-modern campaigns always. However, this integration also increased coordination costs. The central scribes had to manage more registers, languages, and local tax systems, increasing administrative complexity over time in historical campaigns. This complexity reduced the speed of decision-making. The bureaucracy became slower, losing the administrative speed that had made it an offensive weapon in the beginning over time. This decay is visible in the records of declining dynasties. The time required to execute mobilization decrees increased from weeks to months, as procedures became bloated over time. By studying these administrative archives, we can trace the rise and fall of strategic power. The capacity to wage war was bound by bureaucratic throughput in historical campaigns. When that throughput declined, the empire could no longer defend its frontiers. It became vulnerable to smaller, faster adversaries who did not carry this bureaucratic weight over time. When those administrative limits were reached, the military superiority of the state collapsed. The empire either had to reform its procedures or face partition by rivals over time. This structural trade-off was the true constraint of pre-modern mobilization. Imperial rulers could not accelerate resource extraction without increasing the size of their bureaucracy in pre-modern campaigns always. Additionally, our analysis of administrative speed has serious limitations. The surviving registers record official quotas, while ignoring the actual corruption and tax evasion on the ground over time. One key distinction is between bureaucratic efficiency and political legitimacy. A highly efficient tax machine could extract resources quickly while delegitimizing the ruling dynasty completely in historical campaigns. We must also note that standardization could lead to administrative paralysis. When local officials faced crop failure, they still demanded the standard grain quota blindly in historical campaigns. However, historical campaigns like the Qin dynasty's massive mobilization for canal construction validate this model. The standardized laws enabled rapid troop assembly across the state in historical campaigns. By defining these boundaries, we clarify our focus. We are examining how procedural standardization created strategic speed, rather than claiming bureaucracy is always effective here in historical campaigns. This brings us back to our opening thesis that bureaucracy was a strategic weapon. Without it, physical distance limits the reach of sovereign mobilization always in historical campaigns. The challenge was not to avoid standardized procedures, but to manage their maintenance costs. Rulers who allowed corruption to bloat the registers lost their strategic speed over time. By recognizing this mechanism, we can see that logistic throughput determined the borders of empires. The limit of expansion was the limit of the road network over time. This insight allows us to evaluate historical campaigns through infrastructure rather than tactical genius. We analyze the transport routes and ledger entries that enabled victory always over time. Rather than treating ancient logistics as simple supply trains, we study them as coordination systems. We check if the state built dedicated highways and depots always over time. Notice the distinction. We are not describing standard merchant transport, but a state-managed distribution network designed to support rapid military mobilization under pressure always in pre-modern campaigns always. When the cost of maintaining this network exceeded the tribute collected, the empire collapsed. The roads fell into disrepair, and mobilization throughput disintegrated rapidly in pre-modern campaigns always. By studying this narrative history, we learn to evaluate authority through its logistical capacity. We observe the limits of command without standardized procedures always in pre-modern campaigns always. Target the logistical infrastructure, not the ruler's decree. The goal is to understand how transaction costs shaped the borders and survival of ancient states always in historical campaigns. In practice, we can evaluate mobilization throughput by mapping road networks. Identifying road width and depot frequency reveals the maximum transit speed over time. We can also study the frequency of audits conducted by Imperial inspectors. These frequent audits suggest that the central courts struggle to maintain trust. Another practical step is to compare tax rates across delegated provinces. Significant variations indicate that regional governors possessed high administrative autonomy always in their respective territories. These observation steps do not replace traditional military history. They provide a structural framework to help us understand the administrative mechanics of power always. We must also check if the state maintains standardized grain pits. The presence of these pits shows a system designed to resist seasonal shortages. Avoid applying modern franchise business analogies to imperial delegation. An ancient empire operated under vastly different political risks and transport speeds, always across long distances. Keep our focus analytical. By studying these coordination systems, we aim to understand the structural properties of historical scaling rather than modern advice indeed. Consult specialized administrative archives for provincial tax lists. Our goal is to examine the organizational limits of pre-modern delegation, not to offer business advice. We must look beyond the battles and analyze the registers that fed the soldiers. The throne changes, the strategy remains. Until next time.